All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It's Miss Abner. We're going to go over the unit circle, which is our 10.2 lesson. If you're not in 10.2, that's fine. We're still looking at the unit circle. All right, so we're going to look at the 30-60-90 relationship, the 45-45-90 relationship, and the 60-30-90 relationship. All right, so I've highlighted my 30-60-90 triangle in blue, my 45-45-90 triangle in green, and my 60-30-90 triangle in pink. So we're going to deal with the blue one first. So the first side that we're going to look at is our long side, our short side, and then our hypotenuse. So in this case, we're just looking at what values are going to show out here for our unit circle. So this side right here is always going to be 1, 0. So I'm looking at this point here. And for that point there, I want to know, well, what two values go there? Well, if I'm looking at what two values are going to go here, then I'm looking at this long side. So my long side, comma, my short side. So this is short, and this is long. So I'll do my key off to the side over here. So this is long side, and this is short side. Okay, and so those are the two that we're dealing with. So this, in this case, it's going to be long, comma, short. So then we're going to look at the 45-45-90 triangle, and we're looking at that. Well, both of our side lengths, if we know a 45-45-90 triangle, both of our side lengths are going to be the same. So that means this is congruent to this. Well, if that's the case, we know that 1 over the square root of 2 is not something that we write because it has the square root on the bottom. So we're going to look at the fact that it's the square root of 2 over 2. And the same thing for this side. It's still going to be the square root of 2 over 2. So then this is going to be, and we'll do it, we'll say just the side length. Make it a different color S. All right, so then this is side over side, or side, comma, side. As they're both the same, doesn't matter which one goes first. Then if we're looking at the 60-30-90 triangle, so this is just a different direction of laying this one. So when we're looking at this, in this case, this one is the long side, and this one is the short side. And so we're going to look at those two. So in this case, to get this value here, remember we're looking at this point here. And for this one, we're looking at this point here. So looking at this point here, it is going to be, and I'm going to adjust the values because it looks like you can barely see that. So this is supposed to be the square root of 3 and 1. Okay, so in this case, it's going to be the short side and then the long side. Okay, these are values that you want to make sure that you remember when you're going over this stuff, because these are the relationships that you're going to constantly see. And notice that for each of these points, we are only in quadrant 1. So we are currently in Q1, which means both of our points should be positive. Okay, so now we're going to look at the unit circle. We're going to give the list of the special values that highlight these triangles. We're going to give them in both, whether you evaluate it at degrees or whether you, let's move up. So we're going to evaluate the unit circle at our special values. The special values are the ones that we just found here at the top. So these up here are the special values. Okay, so if we're looking at these special values, here we go. All right, so when we're looking at the special values, like I said before, we're going to remember what we did up here. So we're looking at short side, long side, short side, depending on the values that we're looking for. So we're going to come down here to our table. We're going to create it so that we can use this later. Okay, so sine is always going to be your y value. And cosine is always going to be your x value. And tangent is always going to be your sine. So your tangent, I'm going to write it down here so I have space, is always going to be your sine divided by cosine. All right, so here we go. Now let's fill in our table. So at 0, that's going to be here. When y is 0, or the degree is 0, right? We're looking for the y value. Well, that's just going to be 0. So then if we're talking about cosine at 0, right? So here, cosine is going to be the x value, so that's going to be 1. And then, I'm pointing up here, you guys can't see it. So at 0 here, because our unit circle is really only 1 inch. So 1, 0. Okay, so then our tangent is going to be, well, y over x. Well, that's just going to be 0 anyway. Because y over x, and it's just going to turn out to be 0. This is not, let me say this again, this is not undefined because there's a 1 down here. So it's just 0. All right, so if we're looking at 30 degrees or pi 6, so we can say when we have a 30-degree triangle, when our center angle is 30 degrees, this is going to be pi 6. See how I wrote that in there? So now that I know that's my pi 6 angle. Okay. So down here, so now I'm going to look at the y value. So x, y. So in this case, I'm going to put into my table 1/2. Then I'm going to look for now at pi 6 or 30 degrees. I'm going to look at my cosine angle. So that's going to be x. So it's going to be the square root of 3 over 2. Now, when we're looking at tangent, that's going to be sine over cosine. That becomes this big, huge, funky fraction. And if you work it out by rationalizing your denominator and getting rid of the fractions, then you're going to end up with square root of 3 over 3. For those who wondered how I came up with that, I took 1/2 and I divided it by square root of 3 over 2. Since they're both fractions, I can't divide fractions, so I just went ahead and said that's the same as 1/2 times 2 over the square root of 3. You have to rationalize the denominator because you can't keep that 3 down there. And the resulting is the square root of 3 over 3. So there would be my work. Okay, so if I'm looking at pi fourths, so that's going to be my 45 triangle. So my 45, 45. So this is going to be pi fourths in radians on my triangle if I'm talking about a 45-degree angle. So in this case, I want the sine value of that 45, and that's going to give me the x, y. Y is my sine. So it's going to give me the square root of 2 over 2. If I'm looking for cosine, and these are just the values I'm putting in my table, and I'll slide down to the table where you can see it. So if I'm looking for my cosine value, x, y, cosine is always x. It's going to be the square root of 2 over 2. So down here in my table, square root of 2 over 2. So if I take this over that, I'm just going to end up with 1 because they're both the same thing. All right, so now I'm going to look at pi thirds. So my pi thirds are my 60 degrees. So now I'm looking at this triangle here, and that's going to be pi thirds for that point there. Okay, so now that I have those, I'm going to look at my first one says sine. So that's going to give me the y value here. So down here in my table, square root of 3 over 2. Then I need my cosine value here. So that's going to be my x value up here, 1/2. Down in my table, 1/2. Tangent, that's just going to be this over that. If I do all my simplifying, following my rules of fractions down here, I'm just going to end up with the square root of 3. So now that I have that all sorted out and I know my values, my last one is that 90 degree. Well, 90 degrees we don't go into, right? Because 90 degrees is just straight up and down right here. So this is 90 degrees, where that center angle is 90 degrees. So this spot on any unit circle is going to be pi halves. So on that one, it's pi halves. On this one, it's pi halves. And on this one, it's pi halves. So everyone gets a pi halves at the top. Okay, so now we're going to look at the 90-degree angle. So now I'll show you how you can do it in your calculator, because all these can be done in your calculator. You just want to be careful for the ones that have the square roots in them, because they're not going to give you the square root symbol if you have the TI 84 calculator like this one. So let's look at it. So if I'm doing sine of 90 degrees, so I'm going to clear my calculator so I can quit. Clear, clear, clear. So I'm going to do sine, this button right here, of 90. Close it. I want to make sure my mode is in degrees, so I know that the answer that will come out is what I'm looking for. So that mode's in degrees. So I'm going to second quit that one. Sine of 90. Enter. Well, look, it's 1. I should come out with the same thing if I take sine of pi halves. Enter. See, I'm in degrees, so it's going to give me this funky thing. But if I change my calculator mode, so mode, if I go down here and change it to radians and hit enter, second quit, now I'm going to put in the same thing as before. I'm going to click back up there and hit enter. When I hit enter this time, well, look at that. I get 1. Make sure your calculator is in the correct mode, degrees or radians, based on what you're putting into sine and cosine. Okay, so there's 1. I did that for 90 and I did it for pi halves. They both came out to be the same when the calculator was in the correct mode. So cosine of 90, I'm going to start with radians because my calculator is already in radians. Okay, so for cosine, I'm going to use for 90 degrees and pi halves. I'm going to start with pi halves because I'm already in radians. My calculator is. So I'm going to say cosine of pi halves. Close it. I'm going to get 0. Okay. So now I'm going to change the mode of my calculator to degrees and hit enter. Then I'm going to quit. So now I have degrees. Now I'm going to take the cosine of 90. 0. Same thing. If I look at tangent, this is where it becomes undefined because it's this over that. So 1 over 0 is equal to undefined. Now, for those of you who struggle between this one and this one, undefined is always when there's a 0 on the bottom. All right, so you're going to need to know the unit circle to be able to reproduce it on a quiz in order for you to use it on the test. So make sure that you get the unit circle memorized. Alrighty, so we're good to go here. See you in the next video.